It's a funny thing about Meredith Willson's follow up to his enormously big hit, The Music Man. If you look at Stanley Green's Encyclopedia of the Musical Theater, or if you crack open his Encyclopedia of the Musical Film, you will find no entry for the Unsinkable Molly Brown, even though it was a hit on stage in 1960 with Tammy Grimes and a bigger hit on screen 4 years later with Debbie Reynolds. The show is pretty much forgotten now, although it's a rousing good time and it's worth the new look that we're going to give it. As usual, when we explore a musical that began life on stage, we're going to spend some time on Broadway first. After The Music Man, Meredith Willson was inundated with ideas for shows. He followed Richard Rodgers' advice, and he chose the one that excited him most. It was a Cinderella, rags to riches story by screen and TV writer Richard Morris, loosely based on the life of a legendary American, Margaret Molly Brown. In Morris's treatment, Molly rises from dirt-poor roots in Hannibal, Missouri, determined to be wealthy, and her mission is accomplished by marrying Leadville Johnny Brown, a prospector who practically mints money. They move to Denver, where they are snubbed by society, but in Europe, Molly becomes the darling of royalty for her honesty and down-to-earth ways. Although she and Johnny split up when he hungers for what a song declares to be Colorado My Home, Molly enters the history books by taking charge of a lifeboat during the sinking of the Titanic. And rest assured, the couple reunite happily as the curtain comes down. Of course, what Molly Brown and The Music Man have in common is a love for Americana. And heaven's sake, that was Meredith Willson all the way. But, if that leads us to assume that he brought a limited perspective to his work as both composer and lyricist, we are mistaken. He was classically trained, and though he played the piccolo in John Philip Sousa's band, which is about as American as you can get, he also played the flute in Toscanini's New York Philharmonic. And he even wrote a couple of symphonies before turning to popular songwriting. He was a master of words and music. He had also written most of the book for The Music Man. But he was delighted to be relieved of that duty on Molly when Richard Morris brought the draft of a solid script to him. The Broadway production was loaded with big names. Dory Sherry as producer and director, the Theater Guild as co-producer, Peter Gennaro as choreographer, and a first-rate design team. Casting the leading roles was truly crucial because Molly and Johnny just sort of drive this entire show. Now, Polly Bergen had done everything except sign the contract, but hang on. The 26-year-old Tammy Grimes had no Broadway track record, but she had a forceful agent who pushed her to audition, and at the 11th hour, he foisted Tammy on the creative team. This is what she told me in 1986.
And I said, Baron, this girl is so stupid. She doesn't know anything. I don't know why you want. I am not like this girl. I'm an intelligent...
With your Boston arts.
I'm an intelligent human being. I mean,
Right.
that girl is just out of... I don't know what she is. I don't like this. And he said... Oh, and he grabbed me by the shoulders and he said, do you want to be a star? Don't you want to be a star? She's only off stage 7 minutes. And I said, you clocked it? And he said, yes. And I said, I want to be a star. And he said, then shut up. And he said, sing something. And I said, all right, I'll sing Melancholy Baby. He said, okay. So we got there and they stuck me in the jump. And 20 minutes later, Miss Bergen left, and then I came out and I was introduced to them in the blackness. They didn't come up right. And I said, I'm going to sing Melancholy Baby. And somebody laughed, you know, the old joke, sing Melancholy Baby.
You're right.
And now I said, no, I'm serious. I am going to sing Melancholy Baby. And I did sing Melancholy Baby. And they said, would you like to sing something else? And I said, no, thank you. And they said, would you would you do us the honor of, you know, they were really, would you be kind enough to read the last soliloquy towards the end of the play? And I said, not at all. And as I started reading it, it was bringing tears to my eyes.
Mm-hmm.
So a part of my brain was saying, this is very good reading, Tammy. I mean, you're about crying yourself. So. Heavens, what a beautiful soliloquy. I could be a good character after all. And so I finished, and I said, and so then Dory Sherry got up on stage, and he said, would you mind dyeing your hair red? And I said, no, not at all. And that was it.
This show won you your first Tony Award in 1960.
I figured she was the scruffiest, dirtiest, I don't know, just mangiest cat that ever was. A wild cat that came out of some place, you know, in the Missouri woods that the mother had left, and she was just struggling. And
right.
She had 3 brothers who she finally found, and then
right.
The dad was roaming around somewhere. And when I caught a hold of that, then I understood, and I had compassion for her.
So yes, Tammy Grimes won a Tony Award as Molly Brown, and she played the entire New York run. She even came to Cleveland on the national tour. Meredith Willson discovered Harve Presnell, blessed with a voice nearly as big as Colorado. He called it unbelievably spectacular. So this musical was an unequivocal hit, right? Actually, there was some equivocating. The New York Times called it a modest measure of enjoyment. And I wonder if you agree that there's something not entirely satisfying about it. In his recent book on Wilson, Dominic McHugh concludes the real problem is that it lies in the shadow of a major hit. But Tammy Grimes won universal praise, and MGM quickly purchased the rights to a film version. Wilson wrote to the Broadway star, Tammy, it would be a sin for anyone but you to play Molly in the movie. But she was no star in Hollywood, and although Harve Presnell got to repeat his Johnny, Debbie Reynolds got the nod for the title role after aggressively campaigning for it. Easy to see why she wanted the part. For 15 years, she had been playing cute ingenues, most famously in Singin' in the Rain, and she wanted to show off what else she could do. We see Debbie's brassy, hell for leather side. She practically jumps off the screen. And MGM's advertising people accurately labeled the picture a Molly Palooza. Debbie won an Oscar nomination, losing to Julie Andrews in Mary Poppins. But she went on. She would make only one more movie musical, though, The Singing Nun. That was 2 years later. Helen Deutsch wrote a screenplay that differs in some ways from the stage musical. We're going to talk about that. We do get close to Broadway, not only in Presnell's performance, but in the exuberant choreography of Peter Gennaro. We're far away from Broadway on the MGM back lot, of course, but most thrillingly in the scenes filmed on location in Telluride, Colorado. An echo is built into Presnell's Colorado My Home and Johnny's soliloquy that will, as Molly might say, knock your socks off. Just a few more things before I let you go. Directed by Charles Walters, who was an old hand at MGM. The movie broke box office records at Radio City Music Hall. It became one of the highest grossing musicals in the whole MGM catalog. By the way, in case you're wondering, I think Tammy and Debbie give equally effective, though very different, performances to be discussed. Warning, though we know how much Johnny loves Molly, in the musical he slaps her. Molly is a wonderfully strong and smart woman, but the musical does not entirely escape the gender roles of the era. You know, something Meredith Willson had predicted came true. He said before the Broadway opening, "Someone is bound to comment I am repeating myself." For example, rhythmic dialogue. Consider, "You got trouble, my friends. Right here I say trouble right here in River City. Why, sure, I'm a billiard player. Certainly mighty proud to say, mighty proud to say it," etc. Well, I wonder if you agree. And if you do agree, why do you think he would do that? Also, why do you think the film retained only 4 of the 16 Broadway songs? If you don't know the original score, I can assure you that the songs are very good indeed. There's a terrific sense of period in this score. So get the CD by all means. Also, there was so much chemistry between Reynolds and Presnell that in 1976 they toured in Annie Get Your Gun, and nearly 30 years after the Molly film, they toured in the stage version. And finally, does this story deal with anything important? Yes, among other things, it's a satire on classism. I'm going to close by quoting musical theater historian Stanley Green, who left Molly Brown out of his 2 encyclopedias, but still had great respect for Meredith Willson. "We don't know nearly enough about the songwriter because he only wrote 3 musicals produced on Broadway. The third was Here's Love in 1963. And yet, as Stanley Green writes, they reveal his world to be a thoroughly affirmative one, full of simple faith, easily reinforced by a miracle or two. Although his roots may be in the rich soil of the heartlands of America, Willson proved that, with conviction and talent, they could be transplanted successfully to the steel and concrete of Broadway." I'm Bill Rudman from the Musical Theater Project.